I can think of no better way to round out 2025 than to look to the future and react to your theories about the future of Final Fantasy XIV. So let's sit back, let's get nice and comfy, and let's try and piece together where this story is going to go. Hello, everybody. It's your boy Jmulls, and this is simply
Nature's proclamation.
So first up on the docket today, we have at Keanu7318 who says, are we going to talk about how the geography/setting of the next location was essentially revealed at the very end of the patch? I do not know what they're talking about here. I went back and rewatched quite a few scenes from the end of patch 7.4, and I didn't pick up on anything that really gave away the exact location as to where we're going next. So if you know what this person is referring to, leave in the comments down below alongside your other theories. However, there was something that I noticed even more rewatching the end of 7.4. That was, and maybe this is unique to the English localization for the story, but I kind of doubt that because it feels really intentional, because it also works with this overall seasonal foundation they're working with this upcoming story arc, and that is the use of flower imagery and also wording that is very closely associated with flowers. I'm not joking. Go back and rewatch a lot of the scenes when we depart Treno. Particularly Kryle's aunt uses a lot of words like bloom and words that are very closely associated with flowers like petals and stuff like that. It's like everywhere. It's more than you think. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if we have a couple of things going into this next story arc. We have the overall theme for each expansion being based on a particular season. Dawntrail was supposed to be summer. Wouldn't surprise me if the next expansion is supposed to be fall/autumn. Unless they want the patches to be autumn, I mean, they could go for that route. But then we have to do winter, and then the probable finale for this entire story arc is almost certainly going to be spring, right? Like, it works with the season theme they're going with here. It also works with the flower imagery, especially as like a seed wintering until winter's over so it can finally sprout and bloom when it comes to spring. It just makes a lot of sense. And personally, I also kind of think they're going to play on this in two different ways. I think there's going to be two main seeds for this upcoming story arc. It's going to be the key to interdimensional travel and also the Warrior of Light /Asm. Probably three if we're talking about not only the source but also all the shards as well. But I think the two major ones will be the characters of the Warrior of Light, and I guess it's not really a character, but that key to interdimensional travel. It'll probably bloom or at some point sprout and become something even more important. It'll probably undergo some kind of transformation. I just feel as if that's going to be the direction they go if we're going to really lean into this flower imagery and also the season analogy they're going for here. That just makes a lot of sense to me. And as we'll talk about later, when it comes to winter, it also makes the name of the group Winter make a lot more sense because it works with all of those themes. I know some people theorize we're going to Mirror City next. I'm fairly confident Yoshi P said in an interview that we actually covered on this channel, because I remember him saying it, that we're not going to Mirror City anytime soon. So if you really wanted to go there in 8.0, sorry, I guess. But I think the far more likely answer is we're either going to go to a whole nother shard like we did in Shadowbringers and just deal with that one shard for an entire expansion, or we do something again similar to what we did in Dawntrail, where we go to another region of Aetheris, but that region is also affected by another shard, so we kind of deal with both at the same time. I'm not sure what their approach is going to be. Who knows? Maybe we just deal with a whole bunch of shards all at once, and each shard is a different zone. I kind of hope they don't go in that direction, because I feel as if it could be far more interesting, especially for the whole world building side of things, if you allow each shard to have its own pretty much world ecosystem and various cultures and all that, just so long as it's explored more like we did in Shadowbringers than in, say, Dawntrail, in my opinion. Who knows? We'll have to see when we get the FanFest.
Nature's proclamation.
Next up, we have at Coley6177 who says, this great Withering definitely plays into something I would really like to see, and based on Helmerut and Calyx's discussion, just might come to fruition. The Warrior of Light fails. I feel that if not the 9th, then we're going to fail or lose out on a different shard. But not only that, we lose someone. I do miss there being casualty and risk. I'm honestly getting flashbacks to reading the Pendragon series and the world hopping and saving and losing that occurred there. With the earlier plot seeds, I'm still convinced we're gonna be doing something with the Void and seeing if we can get it back to the 13th, Gaia 0. But now this throws in a whole new thing. I'm excited, I'm curious, and I have so many questions. Also, based on 7.4, the research from preservation and its presence throughout the second half of Dawn Trail, I think it's safe to say the key is going to be the story arc's Nidhogg's Eye, serving as the catalyst for a number of events that start to fall like dominoes. I'm assuming not the pizza place. I entirely agree. I think the key to interdimensional travel is going to be this new story arc's Nidhogg's Eyes. It's going to be the thing that gets us from one expansion into the next, probably. There'll almost certainly be a story arc at some point, maybe they do it a couple of times, where we lose the key to interdimensional travel and like the villains get it or some other group gets it. We have to go retrieve it. I can like see it already. Like that's going to be a main doohickey going into the future. Not a doubt in my mind. And going back to something we just talked about in the last theory, like just looking at it, like this thing that's glowing in the middle definitely looks like it could be something that blooms open at some point in the future during some big story event. They're probably going to use a lot of flower imagery, both subtle and also very in your face. I imagine this is going to be one of the key culprits of that. I definitely think at some point this thing in the middle is going to sprout into like a flower-like entity. Also, like what we talked about before, it's definitely connected to Asm in some way, at least. I still basically agree with Jesse Cox in this issue. I definitely think the next big story arc is going to be very personal to the Warrior of Light and deal a lot with Asm and Asm's travels overall, and us basically like tracing his footsteps, kind of like what Emmett Silk alluded to at the end of Endwalker, and how we've already been doing that to some degree. Now, my next point here will be highly dependent upon the context of what 7.5 ends up being, but as of right now, I really do hope that they have the balls to just wipe out the 9th. If you're going to play up on this whole Great Withering thing, it being like nature's proclamation, if you're going to establish this thing to be this true giant threat that we have to deal with and really lock in to find some kind of remedy for, you have to show it being that big threat. And I think wiping out the 9th, wiping out Cheno, having a body count here, that can go a long way to making the Great Withering feel like an actual threat. You spent all of 7.4 making us like Cheno and the people of Cheno, being about, oh, they're so happy and welcoming, because they were. It was a very warm atmosphere. Cheno was a very nice place to be in. And it really does kind of feel like setup to where it's like, okay, you like this place? Well, now we're going to take them out back and old yell at them. And you can make it doubly tragic, but also just like wiping out living memory. After all the effort and work we put into shaping and like modifying that zone, just wiping the slate clean and deleting it basically, that could be an amazing spark to like push us into this next big narrative arc with purpose and a sense of desperation that I think we're going to need. And like maybe it would, like, the only thing that's making me think they won't do this is, do they have the balls to basically remove a zone for us so that we can't really go back there? Or if we can go back there, it's just a barren wasteland again, depending upon how they want to play on the Great Withering and what it actually does. I hope they do have the balls, because I think a cool element for an MMORPG is that the world can shift and change with the course of the story, or that it should. Final Fantasy XIV has done this to some degree in the past. Having the giant ziggurat towers spawn over the world, the freaking moon, and all that kind of stuff. Have the balls to change the world. Maybe you can have like some gameplay mechanism where you can like go into the past, kind of like how World of Warcraft does it with like Chromie Time, where you can like go into the past to a previous version of the zone if you want to G-pose and do like fates and stuff like that. I guess you could also just make it a separate zone and just have the old version like not be canonical, that you can go to it anymore. But again, just have the balls to do something like that. It would be a great moment to get people to go back and go, whoa, okay, things are getting serious now. I think Final Fantasy XIV's story needs a moment like that. It needs that spark. Maybe it happens in 7.5, and maybe it happens in 8, or maybe 9.0, who knows?
Nature's proclamation.
Next up, we have at Wargiver, who says, my first time encountering your videos, so to share my take, first of all, welcome. Hello, hello, hello. I think we're going to see a storyline that rhymes with Shadowbringers. The setup is that we will explore the 9th and find various beasts like the Doom Chain. What we don't know is they are feeding off of the 11 and converting it to something else. We kill them as threats only to learn of our error. The 11-powered beasts were holding back the 9th from going over the brink and becoming entirely consumed like the 13th. Halmarut dubs this Withering because because of who she is. So Malala are working to stop this and have created the beasts. We might need to use the key to stabilize the ninth, and by doing so, we stabilize other reflections. First, we do not know that Halmarut and Calyx are part of the Winterer group. The words, at least the English version, at the end of the fight against Calyx, he used the phrase, "our winter appears." This could mean that they are part of the group, or it could mean that they are adjacent and working towards the same goal. My reason for questioning this is rolled into the second. Second, Winterer is a word used to refer to someone that takes up residence for the winter, aka a snowbird. The Malala are from the source and took up residence on the ninth during the Age of Eternal Frost. They left to escape the freezing of the ocean. That would make the Winterers in that context, or them Winterers in that context. Third, preservation's purpose drifted from curing Levin sickness, basically something that can be provided now, to farming ether to support the endless. Interdimensional fusion is basically another way of rejoining, fusing two dimensions. However, this does not sound like the typical Ascian rejoining, as that would be to the source. This sounds like it would be to another reflection. More so, preservation was founded by Calyx, and he has been an endless operating continuously for 400 years. As an ally of an Ascian and the inventor of the regulators, I find it hard to believe he is unaware of how many souls actually function. He clearly knows that memories are stored as ether on top of the soul and are washed off on death with only the strongest remaining. Fourth, Halmarut was the seat of plants and agriculture. The fact the threat is called the Withering and it's connected to the ninth that clearly is nearly totally barren should not be overlooked as a connection. There's a lot of great points here, and I'm just going to lead everything I'm about to say with the following. For the love of God, don't just be rhyming Shadowbringers story beats. Please, please, please. And if you're going to do so, do it because it's an intentional misdirect. And at some point, the story is going to completely diverge from what we did in Shadowbringers. I don't think anyone really wants it just to be a one-for-one retelling. I'm not saying that's what they were saying either. I'm just saying overall, I hope it isn't a one-for-one basically retelling. Now, for Halmarut and Calyx being a part of Winterer or not, I think that it's far more likely that they are part of Winterer, but it would be a very interesting plot twist if Winterer was a different group and they were just kind of adjacent to them or working with them or something. I think the answer is probably that they are part of Winterer, or at least working for or with Winterer. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I would be kind of surprised if that wasn't the case. Our Winterer peers could just be referring to the fact that they have peers within Winterer, and that the members of Winterer are more akin to partners than, say, subservient to any, or at least partners to Calyx and Halmarut, instead of being subservient to Calyx and Halmarut. I also definitely agree. I think there's probably a connection between the fifth umbral calamity, which was the Great Freeze, or whatever the heck they call it, the Calamity of Ice. It's probably a safe bet that there is a connection between the people affected by the Calamity of Ice and Winterer. It wouldn't surprise me if, much like the Malala were able to escape the Calamity of Ice by basically teleporting themselves to the ninth, it wouldn't surprise me if someone else made it out and formed the group Winterer. It could just be a cool parallel that they wrote into the story, or there could be some kind of deeper significance between the group being called Winterer and the whole Malala escaping the Calamity of Ice. We have to wait and see. I think there's probably a connection there. When it comes to Calyx, I personally think that the reason he acted the way that he did was because he knew what the Great Withering was going to be like, or what form it would take, and for some reason just believed the Endless was one of the only ways that he could actually have people quote-unquote survive what was to come, if you even want to call the Endless surviving anything. At this point in time, we still don't know exactly what the Great Withering is or how it functions, but I do think it's pretty safe to say that we can probably take Calyx at his word at the end of 7.4, where his ultimate goal was basically, in his eyes, save people, and the Endless was his way of saving people from death. Not just from the Great Withering, but also just death overall. He viewed the Endless as a way to basically cheat death and get around it. My only question is, what was his long-term goal? Because sure, you could go to all the various shards and suck up their ether to fuel the Endless, but what happens when you run out of shards? And then eventually, just going down that line of thinking, what happens when you run out of worlds to basically suck? Sorry about that, bump the mic. But like, that's a good point there. Like, what would happen if you run out of ether? Does Calyx have a backup plan? Because it seemed like he wanted to live eternally, and at that point, that's not eternal eternal life, if you even want to consider the endless to be a form of living. It's basically just a glorified stay of execution. And yeah, I also agree. I think having the Ascian be Halmarut, especially as we talked about before, with the flower imagery that is almost certainly going to be very prevalent in this upcoming story arc that already exists in 7.4. And I imagine it's probably there at some points previously in the story that I was just overlooked. Having it be Halmarut, who is very closely associated with those elements. I also think Fungus, you know, she was a bit of a fun guy. It just makes a lot of sense to me. Now, overall, though, going back to one of the first points in this overall theory, I'm not sure how I feel about having an entire expansion be devoted to just exploring the ninth. I mean, like, they're the writers, right? They could absolutely write it to be like kind of like the first, where there's pockets of civilization that could have been like a holdover to where the giant lightning storms haven't completely obliterated like certain sections of the world, like Treno and stuff like that. I'm just thinking about it. And like, yeah, you could write it in such a way, but would it feel overly like Shadowbringers again? Also, theoretically, how many different like aesthetics could we like fit into something with that way of thinking, to where would all the zones just feel like Heritage Found again, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, would we just have like a series of 5, maybe 4 zones that all basically just feel like that one zone? But again, I don't know if that's going to be the direction they go in. It would be interesting. I'm personally more in the mindset. Again, this entirely depends on the context of how they write the story, but as of right now, I'm more in favor of them just using the ninth as a way to showcase what the Great Withering is and how devastating it could possibly be. Maybe they want that to be a more immediate thing, and maybe we get to like 7.5 and the ninth is just wiped out by the end, and that leads us into 8.0. Who knows? A lot of great points are raised here, in my opinion, though. God, it's so good to have this future of Final Fantasy XIV be this interesting again.
Nature's proclamation.
And now here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below. I need 2 things from you. Or you can just give me 1 if you want. Look at the YouTube comment, it's not that serious. But I need your theories for the future of Final Fantasy XIV. I need your craziest, your wildest, your wackiest theories, and I may react to them in a future video. But the hot take doom train approaches, people, and if you got your own hot take about Final Fantasy XIV that you want me to react to in another future video, leave that down below as well. Love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And look, 7.4 has been really dang good so far. I love the MSQ. I absolutely adored the Arcadian. What did they do to my boy, though? Aurum Vale, what have they done? Well, I mean, it's a level 48, 49, whatever dungeon. It's a dungeon problem all over again. Want to hear what happened and my thoughts on the whole situation? You should check out this video right here for more, people. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.